Timandra Harkness. She's a writer, broadcaster, presenter. Her work looks at the intersection between technology, data and society. She's presented lots of programs on Radio 4, such as Future Proofing and How to Disagree. Her current book is Technology is Not the Problem, available in all good bookshops.
And some evil ones.
And some bad online ones, I assume. But you may also know, of course, well, big data does size matter. So what's the story? Numbers and narratives.
Thank you very much. Well, it's particularly hard to follow that glorious act because I think I'm the first person today to have no slides. I've literally got a talk written on a piece of paper, and the other two people in this session, as far as I know, are only appearing virtually. So it's a good job that Duncan woke you all up after lunch, is all I'm going to say. Yeah, good. So, I wanted to call this What's the Story? Narratives and Numbers, because I realised that when I'm being a journalist and also in most of the other stuff I do, making a story is kind of the heart of what I do. So I want to start off actually with a little story that I read in the Times last week, and I'll tell you at the end what the headline was if you want to go look it up for yourself. But the story basically is, influencer has phone snatched during mid-recording. So Elizabeth Lopez Aguilar was out with her boyfriend in London celebrating his birthday. They were on their way to see the musical Hercules that evening. And on the way, at the London Eye, she put her phone down on a bench in front of her and she stepped back to start making a TikTok video, and a phone thief ran through and grabbed the phone and ran off. This is actually, if you go to the Times website, you can see the video which shows her putting the phone down and then a blur as the phone goes off. But what the thief didn't know is that Aguilar is in fact a Texan track athlete currently in training for an Ironman triathlon. So she gave chase with her boyfriend and they chased the thief down and got the phone back. And she said she didn't bother to alert the police because the thief went off with no resistance and she got the phone back. So she carried on. Now, the Times article goes on to say that nearly 2 in 5 phones stolen in London, nearly 2 in 5 phones stolen in Europe are taken in the UK, and 42% of all UK phone thefts happen in London. So London is the location for 16% of all phone thefts in Europe. So if you're visiting Britain for this conference and you're going home via London, just be a bit careful. Mobile phone thefts reported to the Metropolitan Police in London increased from 91,481 in 2019 to 117,211 in 2024. And I thought it was a very interestingly told story, news story. And it reminded me that there's an inherent tension in journalism, and I think in a lot of other communication, in fact, between the objective factual accuracy that I think we all in this room value and the human need for story. And this is particularly salient to me because my mother was a professional storyteller, which also made her a terrifyingly good liar, by the way. But she was a professional storyteller, and people say, what do you actually do for work? Then she'd say, I tell stories. People pay me to go and tell them stories. So this is something that she very much inculcated in me in all the communication that I do. The problem, as I see it, is that journalists have a duty, which is to give the public a truthful account of reality, to equip them to make up their own mind what to think. But the public, and this very much echoes something Duncan was saying, the public has absolutely no duty to read what you write, or to listen to what you say, or to watch what you produce, or any of that. They have no duty, and they are perfectly entitled to respond, so what? Why should I care? And in fact, very often the first thing you need to tell them is precisely the answer to, why should I care? And it may be a pragmatic answer, and some of the stuff we've heard about today, you can very well argue to people, well, you should care because this could affect your future health, or your future wealth, or your children's prospects, or something else that you do care about. But even then, generally, you need a story to tell them, which is a story about a future then that is going to be healthy or not healthy, or wealthy or not wealthy, or a story about their children, their children's lives, in order to get them emotionally engaged. And this is, in fact, this is why most features, news stories, start off, like that Times article, with a story about an individual, because that emotionally engages the audience and provokes in them the desire for answers to questions like, well, who did this, and why did they do it, and how did it happen, and how can we stop it happening to somebody else? Who is responsible for this? So it provokes the idea, the desire to get answers to these questions. And one problem we have communicating statistics and data and maths is that numbers don't speak for themselves. So you can say, well, the answer to I want to give an objective account of reality to the audience is, well, you should let the numbers speak for themselves, or let the facts speak for themselves. But numbers don't speak for themselves. Numbers don't have a story. That's why it takes a human to tell the story. And in fact, this is why statistics, particularly, is an art as much as a science, because it's the art of finding the story in the numbers and telling it to the human audience. Now, there is always a story there, because any kind of statistics or mathematics or data is inherently a human story of humans who have discovered or created this data. It's not like a hill that arises spontaneously out of nature and you just look at it. Numbers and data are things that humans we decide what to measure, we decide what to collect, what to hang on to. We decide how to structure reality, if you like, through numbers. So there is always a human story there of the humans who have collected or created these numbers or the data or the statistics or whatever. And if you go back to how research works and how the statistics are collected and used, there is always a story there of looking for answers. So when you're analysing the data from a study or from research, you're always saying, well, what can this tell us about the world? What is the story that this can tell us about the world? Is it a story about causality, about one thing causing another? Is this evidence for a hypothesis, which is a kind of story about how the world works? Is this evidence in a kind of thriller or mystery, detective story? That, oh, you know, I had this theory and this is backing it up. Or is it evidence against a theory, which is going to make me go back and revise my assumptions about the world? And good researchers are always looking harder for that evidence, the evidence that challenges their worldview and makes them think again about their assumptions. And writing a news story, a feature, I think should be a similar process, that you're looking for evidence about a theory about the world, and ideally you're looking harder for evidence that maybe some of your assumptions are wrong, and that's when a news story does tell you something new and challenges your assumptions and maybe even the assumptions of your audience, which is what makes a news story really actually attention grabbing, because you think you know something about the world and then you're surprised. You think you know something about what's happened, and then turns out that the reasons behind it are not what you expected. So just as a good researcher should be open to that evidence that challenges their assumptions, that contradicts their theory, a good journalist should also be looking for that evidence that challenges their theories and contradicts their assumptions, and hopefully the assumptions of their audience as well. But this is still a problem, because there is an inherent tension between that desire to investigate, test and challenge and surprise and make people reconsider assumptions, and the deep emotional appeal of a story. And so I first got interested in statistics about 20 years ago. I did maths at school, and then I went and did other things, and then I ended up doing a maths degree at the Open University. That Kevin very modestly said he's a statistician, but in fact designed the stats half of the degree that I did. Thank you, Kevin. And but what happened, the reason I got interested in statistics was, about 20 years ago, suddenly mainstream news outlets started using infographics and statistics, and The Guardian, on the front page of The Guardian would be bar charts and pie charts and statistics to 2 decimal places. Usually quite implausibly 2 decimal places, quite honestly. But these were the front page of a very popular newspaper. And then a lot of other news outlets, in fact, doing the same thing. And I was intrigued because obviously I liked maths. So this was about the point I decided to start studying maths again. I like maths. But loads of my friends, who I knew for a fact hate and fear mathematics, were all really thrilled to see statistics and graphs and pie charts and bar charts all over the media. I thought, well, this is really interesting. There's obviously something cultural going on here. There's obviously something that appeals to people about this quite implausible level of precision in statistics. And I began to think that, for some of you, you've literally been in your infancy at this point. But those of us who are old enough to remember about 20 years ago, you think what the world was like. It was becoming less predictable. It was becoming harder to predict, harder to understand, harder to make sense of. And I realised that for a lot of people, the idea that you could predict and measure and understand the world to 2 decimal places with graphs made it somehow more controllable, less frightening, even if what you were being shown was a prediction that the future was going to be bad, it was going to be worse than now. Somehow the idea that you could measure how much worse it was going to be to 2 decimal places made that seem more understandable and more controllable and was kind of reassuring. And unfortunately, I then realised that my very unpopular role was going to be to tell people that actually the world isn't that simple or predictable. And if anyone shows you a prediction to 2 decimal places, it's almost certainly going to be wrong. And this was unwelcome, obviously, because people were looking to stats, not actually to equip them to understand and change the world, but just to reassure them that somebody knew what was going on and that it was in some way predictable and under control. Now, obviously, numbers can help us make sense of the world. That's kind of why we're all here, I think, that we all have some confidence in that, bearing in mind the inherent level of uncertainty. So it's not that you can't use numbers to understand and indeed act upon the world. But I think if we use data to tell a reassuring fairy tale about the world, that everything can be summed up in numbers and you can reach a conclusion that's neat and is going to come true, then we're actually doing people a disservice. But the problem is, that's misleading just as badly as if you deliberately misuse data or ignore uncertainty or misinterpret statistical patterns. But the problem is, one of the things that people like about that story about the world, that numbers can sum it up and predict it and pin it all down in a neat way, is that our inherent love for story is that story structures the world and makes sense of the world and takes you to a satisfying emotional ending. And that is one of the things that people want from stories, and from stories including numbers. That stories make sense in a way that the world doesn't make sense, in fact. They reach a satisfying conclusion, ideally one in which the wicked are punished and the good live happily ever after. But if we're going to be honest with the audience and give them a truthful picture, then we may not be able to fulfil that desire for a satisfying story arc, because the world is messy in that way. So I just want to try some of this, not just to check you're still awake, because I can see you're still awake. I want to go back to the story I told you at the beginning and see what you remember from it. So who was the influencer? Anyone remember?
Elizabeth.
Aguilar, I think.
Yeah, very good. Okay, top marks. Why was she out in London that evening?
She was going to see Hercules.
She was going to see Hercules. Good detail. And what happened?
She was at the Eye, recording a TikTok video, and
You've got a great memory for stories. This is brilliant. Yeah, she got phone snatched to make a TikTok video. What was she in training for? Ironman triathlon, indeed. What proportion of phones stolen in Europe are stolen in the UK?
16%.
2 out of 5. What proportion of the phones stolen in Europe are stolen in London? 16%. Very good. This is an audience of mathematicians, though, isn't it? This is remembering numbers. What was the increase in London phone thefts from 2019 to 2024? This is very good. All right. How did you feel when I told you that story at the beginning? Interested. Anything else? Surprised about the Iron Man
I
bit?
was quite excited by the chase. I
Quite
like
excited about the chase. Yeah, it was really thrilling, wasn't it? If you find it on the Times thing, you can see the look. Well, you can't see him catch it, but you can see it runs off. Yeah. Anything else?
Pleased with the outcome.
Pleased with the outcome. Yes. He got his comeuppance. Good triumph for once. Exactly. I mean, I should have wrestled him to the ground, had him arrested, but you know, it's like the point. She got her phone back, and everything. It was a happy ending. And so the reason I ask is, my mum, I told you, my mum was a storyteller, and she told me this thing which you may have heard a different version of, which is they won't remember what you told them, but they will remember how you made them feel. That has been attributed to a bunch of people, including in quite often Maya Angelou, even though there's absolutely no evidence she ever said it. But remember that. They won't remember what you told them, but they will remember how you made them feel. But this is back to this difficulty, because we want to capture people's attention with some kind of story, and it may not be like that. Maybe the story of how somebody studied a problem for years and years and then finally solved it, and what a great thing this was for them, or how they solved a problem that's going to save us all from impending asteroid attack or whatever. But we want to capture people's attention to the story, and we want to provoke the emotions that will make them engage and remember what we told them. But we also want to deliver information in a way that says, here are the facts, you make up your mind what to feel. And I just think this is a real, I think it's a real problem for communicators. I'm sorry to be such a downer after lunch and say, here's a problem, I don't have a solution to it either. Because obviously, at this point, what I should do is round off the presentation in a satisfying, emotional way that ties up all the loose ends. But that's precisely what I can't do. Believe me, I've been trying for a week to think of a satisfying conclusion that gives you all the answers on this. So all I can leave you with is my thoughts, which is, it's not wrong to want to provoke emotions, but we can think about what emotions we provoke. All right. So if I bothered to do a single slide, it would have this on it. We can aim to provoke the excitement of curiosity instead of the comfort of confirming what people already think. So curiosity, not confirmation. Don't unsettle them with the desire to know answers rather than settle them and go, yes, everything you thought about the world, this story proves you were right. We can try and engage them in a sense of shared responsibility to find out more about the world in order that we can be more effective in the world, so that it becomes a shared project between us and the audience. Like we help them find out, but we don't pretend to have all the answers. And we can help to feed a sense of agency, a sense of ability to do something about the world, rather than a sense of helplessness, which tends to foster fear and anger. If we engage them with a sense that you can find out more and you can do something, then those are emotions which, in my humble view, are better than the other ones. That's really all I can offer. And what this means, which I think is often difficult as communicators, is trusting the audience to have that curiosity and take on that sense of shared mission to find out more, and to take on that sense of agency and let go of the desire to leave them feeling what we think they ought to feel, and say, well, I want to share with you the opportunity to learn more about the world and to do something about the world, and what you do with that is up to you. So there's the unhappy ending of my talk. Thank you.